Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. I am your book reviewer, and today we're going to review the book The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner by Stephenie Meyer. This is, underneath here, it says in very, very small print, an eclipse novella, which means that it kind of takes off of the third book, Eclipse, in the Twilight Saga, which I just reviewed. And if you remember my review of Eclipse, it focuses on a newborn vampire that I talked about named Bree Tanner. And it focuses on the kind of other end of Eclipse that we didn't hear about because Eclipse is focused on Bella and Edward and their kind of experiences and their actions. This one focuses on the newborn vampires who are being raised and reborn, if you want to call it that, and to fight an army against the Cullens. So this focuses on one of the newborn vampires, whose name is Bree, as you can imagine. And she doesn't know much about her life before she became a vampire. She doesn't remember too much about it. She's one of the newer ones, I should say. She became a vampire 3 months before this book took place. And there's about 20 newborn vampires all living kind of together in this one house. And she doesn't really get along with a lot of them, and she doesn't feel like she belongs with a lot of them because they're really wild, and they kind of pick fights with each other, and because they're newborn vampires, and in this world, newborn vampires are very unstable, and they're very strong, so they can easily pick fights with one another, and but they're strong, and so they can easily rip off limbs and things, and Bree has had limbs ripped off her, but they come back on. Somebody sews them back on, which is fun. But the one other vampire that she kind of connects with is a boy named Diego, and they have kind of the traditional rules of being a vampire that may be a lot other than the Eclipse, or other than the Twilight Saga, you may be familiar with, meaning that they only go out at night. They don't sleep during the day necessarily, but they stay in their house during the day because they were told by their ruler, Riley, that if they go out in the sun, they'll burn and they'll die. So they always try to make it back home before sunrise. And, but there's one time when Bree and Diego are out, and the house that they lived in was, exploded or imploded or something. It's kind of in a pile of rubble. And they don't know why, because it wasn't on when they were at home. And, but they have to find other shelter because the sun is coming up. And so one of the things that they do is, Diego knows where there's a cave, and so he and Bree go underwater and go in this kind of underwater cave. And while they're there, it's one of those that kind of has an opening to the sun, and sunlight does hit them, and they notice that, kind of like the Cullens, where their skin doesn't burn off at all, it kind of shimmers, and we kind of rainbow, like there's, a whole bunch of prisms on their skin, and they're like, whoa, this is cool, I wonder if everybody else knows this. And so they're very careful to tell people, especially Riley, because they knew that Riley was, again, is their leader, but he he's not very trustworthy, because he doesn't really tell them a lot of things, and he doesn't, whatever they're thinking, he's like, oh, don't worry about it. This is how it goes, and this is, just the way it has to be. So, and they know that Riley is in good form with, and in good standards with Victoria. However, they don't know Victoria's name. They just call her, and she. So, but if you're familiar with the Twilight Saga, you know who they're talking about. And they, Bree and Diego decide at one point to follow Riley, where they meet up with Riley, and where Riley is meeting with Victoria, and Bree and Diego inadvertently also see the Volturi, even though they don't know who that is. They just remark that they're people in black cloaks who talk to Riley and Victoria and say that what they're doing is wrong, and they're breaking the rules. But the Volturi don't do anything about it, and they end up leaving. And so, a little while after that, Diego decides that he is going to talk to Riley about this, being able to be outside during the daytime. And Diego's like, well, if he knows about it, then I'll just, kind of play like I found it, and I won't bring you into it at all. And so Bree's like, okay. So she goes back to their new house, in a different part of Seattle where they're living. And pretty soon after that, Riley comes back, but Diego doesn't. And so she's kind of worried about what happened to Diego, and just kind of goes like, but she asked Riley where Diego was, and Riley was like, oh, he's ahead with her, we'll see him later. And Riley begins to tell them that they are going to band together and defeat this new coven of vampires who instead of having red eyes like they do because they eat humans, this coven has yellow eyes, and they're the enemy, and they're different, and they're older, and they're extra special because some of them have special abilities. And then he kind of adds one more thing and he's kind of funny the way he says it, is like, well, we're going to fight this, and that's one big thing. And the second big thing is there's kind of a dessert in the midst, because not only do they have yellow eyes and they have special powers, but they're also kind of carrying around with them a pet human, is how he calls her, or how he calls Bella. And Riley presents a shirt of Bella's that he took from her room, and they smell her, and along with Bree smells her, and all of a sudden Bree and all of the other vampires are really hungry with thirst, because like, ooh, it's a human, it's new blood, it's fresh blood, and so they go and they start this war with them. And along with Diego being connected with Bree also finds a friend in this boy named Fred. And I guess Fred is kind of ignored by everybody else, I think because he has kind of a bad stench. And but Bree kind of figures this out to her advantage, because nobody goes near Fred, and if she sticks near Fred, nobody will go near her. So, and she tolerates Fred's apparent stench, and Fred and she kind of form a little bond where Fred's like, I don't want to fight anybody. I'm actually gonna take off and head for the hills, and you're free to come with me if you want. And she's like, well, yeah, maybe I will, but she goes with the other group to go fight the Cullen vampires. And once they find the place where this battle is supposed to be, she's noticing that these newborn vampires are just getting killed left and right, and she doesn't want to die. And she's like, wait, I didn't really want to fight this to begin with, which she didn't. And she's like, I surrender, and I don't want to fight. And then, very similar to what happens in the end of Eclipse is kind of what happens at the end of this book, where the Cullens, she realizes that the Cullens are not what Riley said, who Riley said they were, and that Riley has just been lying to them left and right, that the Cullens are actually very nice, and she was taken really aback by how nice the Cullens were, especially Carlisle, because he was like, we don't want to hurt you if we're just kind of defending ourselves. This wasn't our war to begin with. If you allow us, we'll help you out. And she actually wanted to be with them and didn't want to fight humans and didn't want to eat humans anymore. But then the Volturi show up, and unfortunately for Bree, they're like, well, see, she was kind of created illegally under our law, and the Cullens again try to reason with the Volturi and say, well, she's not harmful, she doesn't want to fight anybody, we can kind of train her and set her, either join our clan or set her free. And the Volturi are like, nope, I'm sorry, it's our decision, and we have to destroy her. And that's kind of where the book ends. So, because, again, Bree's life is over, so her thoughts are over. So, anyway, I liked the book. It was cute. It was short, so I read it in like a day. So, but I am now going to read the last book in the Twilight series, Breaking Dawn, so we can finish the Twilight saga. And so will be up for next week. And I bid you a farewell and happy reading.